It is Wednesday, July 2nd, 11 a.m. We have an update for you on the tropics. And I got to tell you, we are watching waters near Florida and the southeast U.S. over the coming 5-6 days or so. And the reason for that, there's a frontal boundary that is going to sag off the southeast coast, kind of stall out. And sometimes we get some tropical development there. We'll talk about that and what's going on over in the eastern Pacific as we go along. I want to start off with the July kind of typical breeding grounds for tropical systems where most tropical storms develop and move during July. The Gulf, one of the big areas, the sea surface temperature is so warm in the Gulf right now. And we get some development sometimes down over the Bay of Campeche, and they can find their way towards the northern Mexican coastline or into South Texas. We had Barry kind of do its thing a little earlier in the season in June. And then you can see in the northern Gulf up towards the Florida Panhandle, this is an area we watch. We also monitor development here in the Western Caribbean. And again, originally kind of that cluster that became Barry kind of worked over into this area across the Yucatan, and then it worked up. So this is another area we monitor. And I also want to talk to you about this area here around the Bahamas and off the Florida coastline. That frontal boundary is going to stall out right in here. And again, this area may be where we see some development. Aside from that, you start to get a little bit of development in the central and western part of the Atlantic basin. As you get over a little later in the season, you start to worry a little bit more about storms coming off the African coast and the Cabo Verde or Cape Verde season. So not quite there yet. Now, as far as the percentage of storms that we see in June, only 6%, 8% of named systems typically occur during July, and then as we get into August, September, that activity really ramps up, starts to wind down in October. So that's just kind of looking back historically at the frequency of named systems. Now that we're into July, we need to start watching even more closely, and we are always monitoring really year-round. But now that these sea surfaces are warm enough to really support some development, we need to pay extra close attention. So as we take a look, there is this stalled kind of frontal boundary. It was a cold front pushing through, created flooding problems across parts of the eastern U.S. It's pushing through our area now. Kind of is a weak cold front or almost a stationary front, but this is going to settle a little farther to the southeast. And eventually, as it sets up off the coast, there's going to be this chance. And it's gone up. Yesterday, it was only a 20% chance for development from the National Hurricane Center. And then late yesterday, it was a 30% chance. This morning, a 40% chance of something tropical, trying to get a little bit better organized. Whether or not it actually becomes a named tropical system, the models aren't going crazy with it. But I will tell you that at least there's some indication there could be a circulation that forms here. And again, with those sea surface temperatures so warm, we want to make sure folks along the southeast U.S. are prepared in case something were to develop. And that could even extend farther to the west into the northeastern Gulf. So we're going to be monitoring all of that. Keep in mind, again, we do have some showers and storms out there. This is not associated with the front that would likely be the catalyst if something were to develop a little bit later on. I'll also mention we're monitoring some of this convection here just south of Mississippi and Alabama and Florida. So there are some storms there, but the actual frontal boundary is still off to the north, and that's what's going to stall out and give us that chance for development. Here's a look at the Euro, and again, that frontal boundary, again, stationary here. You get the winds around that. We could see an area of low pressure somewhere along that. So we're going to continue to watch and see if we do have that come together. The next name on the list is Chantal. And again, it's not likely that we get it out of this system, but I will say, the GFS model was showing a little bit of maybe circulation and some enhanced rainfall back up towards the South Carolina coast, maybe the Georgia, South Carolina area. As we take a look at another one of the models, the Euro here, kind of projecting some of the rainfall. You can see some of that heavier rainfall up into this area a little farther north along the South Carolina, almost up to the North Carolina coast, and some more rainfall here in Florida. We'll see. Again, nothing that's overly dramatic there. When you compare the Eastern Pacific activity to the Atlantic activity, we've only had the two systems, and neither one of these lasted for even a full day. I mean, they were so quick, spun up in the morning, gone in the evening. They were just kind of here and gone. Again, Barry impacting the Mexican coast on the Gulf, and then Andrea harmlessly out over the North Atlantic. That was never a problem. In the Eastern Pacific, we've had several storms, 6 in fact, and Flossie earlier was a Category 3. Of course, Eric was a Cat 4. So already 2 major hurricanes in the Eastern Pacific. Flossie is now down to a Category 2 with the 11 o'clock update. The movement now with Flossie is west-northwest at 10 miles per hour. Again, here's the Mexican coastline. This is the Eastern Pacific. And you can see as we take a look here, the winds at 110. It is a strong Category 2. It previously had winds up around 115, sustained. So it was a Cat 3, now down to a Cat 2. Now, the forecast for this does call for additional weakening, and eventually it goes back to a remnant low. And you're taking a look at this and thinking, well, Craig, this is out over open water. Why wouldn't it continue to maintain strength? Well, when you put the sea surface temperatures on this projected path, it really tells a story. This is very warm sea surface water here when it was at Category 3. Now it's starting to move over slightly cooler water. It's down to a 2. And as it moves out, these waters get cooler and cooler. So it's going to lose its energy that comes up from those warm sea surfaces. And we're going to see it down to probably 40 miles per hour or so as a remnant low by early Thursday. And then into Saturday, it even weakens more. So not too worried about Flossie. It stays offshore. There is another area, though, and this one has a 50% chance of development. So there's Flossie. Flossie is going to continue moving off to the west-northwest, but there could be yet another area developing over the coming 7 days. So we're going to be watching that. The next name on the list, you know, we have Flossie. The next one up is Gil. That's the G name. So we'll see if things continue to roll. But that Eastern Pacific area has been extremely active. Want to remind you, as we really get into the tropical season now, the Atlantic season starts June 1 and runs through the end of November. But now that we're into July and soon to be into August and September, the peak of the season, you really do want to stay up on things. We've got great resources available for you at 13newsnow.com, and we've got an entire hurricane section of our website set up there, all of our digital platforms, lots of great information available to you. So I highly encourage you to continue to check back with 13 News Now, and our entire team will keep you updated on all of the tropical developments throughout the season.